Life along the border at the U.S.-Mexico border has dramatically changed in recent years.
There were record numbers of apprehensions of migrants on the southern border.
You think you know this border. You've seen the maps. You've watched the news. You've heard the arguments 1,000 times. And you think you understand what 1,954 miles of boundary between the United States and Mexico actually means. You don't. Because the border on the news is a cartoon, a political shorthand, a thumbnail version of one of the most geographically insane, historically bizarre, and economically complex boundaries on Earth. I'm going to give you 50 facts that will shatter that cartoon. 50 things you got completely wrong about the US-Mexico border. By fact number 7, the map in your head will look nothing like it did when we started. Here's what the border actually is. Not politically, geographically. 1,954 miles, from the Pacific Ocean near San Diego to the Gulf of Mexico at Brownsville, Texas. It crosses desert, mountain, canyon, and river. It touches 4 U.S. states and 6 Mexican states on the other side. For 60% of its length, the border is not a wall, not a fence, not a line in the sand. It's a river that floods, a river that shifts, a river that has redrawn the international boundary and caused more legal disputes than most countries have wars. The map is clean, the reality is not. And that gap is exactly where these 50 facts live. The geography. Fact 1. The border is not 2,000 miles. The official measurement is 1,954 miles. Disputed for over 150 years because the Rio Grande keeps moving. Every flood changes it slightly. The boundary is not fixed. The border isn't a line, it's a living argument. Fact 2. 64% of the border is a river. The Rio Grande, or Rio Bravo del Norte, as Mexico calls it, forms 1,254 miles of the boundary. Here's the part you got wrong. That river no longer reaches the Gulf of Mexico. It's so overtapped by agriculture and cities on both sides that it frequently runs dry before it gets there. Fact 3. The Sonoran Desert section is one of the deadliest environments on Earth. Summer temperatures regularly exceed 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Since 1998, over 4,000 sets of human remains have been documented in this zone alone. The desert hasn't just shaped the border, it has functioned as enforcement. Fact 4. The border fence covers roughly 700 miles. Out of 1,954, that's 36%. For the remaining 64%, the primary barrier is the geography itself. River, canyon, desert, mountain range. The wall isn't the border. The wall is a portion of the border. Fact 5. The border changes direction 26 times because the original surveyors were working with 1850s equipment in terrain that actively tried to kill them. The line they drew has angular corrections and measurement errors stretching up to half a mile off in some places. Fact 6. The Salton Sea, California's largest lake, is a border accident. In 1905, a poorly engineered irrigation canal broke open and diverted the entire Colorado River into an ancient basin for 2 years. The result? A 35-mile-long inland sea that has been slowly dying ever since. Fact 7. There are documented places along the Rio Grande where U.S. soil sits on the Mexican side of the river, because the river moved through flooding, but the legal boundary didn't. You can stand on American ground and look up at Mexico above you. The International Boundary and Water Commission has spent decades formally resolving incidents like this. Fact 8. The border crosses 5 distinct climate zones: Mediterranean, desert, semi-arid, subtropical, and humid subtropical. The weather on the Pacific end has almost nothing in common with the weather at the Gulf end. It's 5 completely different worlds stitched together by a treaty. Fact 9. In Big Bend, Texas, where the Rio Grande curves dramatically south and back north, the United States is actually south of parts of Mexico. If you're standing on the American side, you are looking north at Mexico. The border inverts your entire mental compass. Fact 10. The border fence, where it exists, doesn't actually run along the legal boundary. In many stretches, it sits 1 to 2 miles inland on the U.S. side, leaving a strip of American territory that can only be accessed from Mexico. American landowners found themselves on the wrong side of the wall they paid taxes to build. Fact 11. The Big Bend region of Texas wasn't formally surveyed until 1970. For over a century after the border was legally established, there was a stretch of the U.S.-Mexico boundary where no one could say with certainty exactly where one country ended and the other began. Fact 12. The border markers run from Monument 1 to Monument 258. Monument 1 sits in the Pacific Ocean, submerged at high tide. The starting point of the most politically charged border in North America is a concrete pillar you'd need a boat to visit. Fact 13. The Rio Grande is obligated by the 1944 Water Treaty to deliver 1.75 million acre-feet of water to the United States from Mexican tributaries every 5 years. Mexico has been chronically in arrears. Droughts have made compliance nearly impossible. The border isn't just a political line, it's a water IOU. Fact 14. The Sonoran Desert contains the only wild jaguar population in the United States, approximately 200 jaguars in the border region. Border construction activities have fragmented their migration corridors, which jaguars have used for thousands of years. The border is a conservation crisis. It just doesn't get airtime. Fact 15. The border fence has literal cattle gates in it. Working ranches along the boundary line have official U.S. government-permitted gate openings in the wall. The security barrier stops people. It doesn't stop cattle. The fence makes accommodations for cows that it doesn't make for humans. That was the geography. Here's where it gets stranger, because the geography is just the surface. The history of how this boundary came to exist is one of the most consequential and most misunderstood stories in North American history. The history plus the cities. Fact 16. Before 1848, this border didn't exist. California, Nevada, Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, Wyoming, and Texas were all Mexico. The border we treat as ancient and permanent is 178 years old. In geographic terms, it's brand new. Fact 17. The Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo was signed on February 2, 1848. Gold was discovered at Sutter's Mill 9 days later, on January 24. The United States acquired California before anyone knew what was under it. Fact 18. The Mexican-American War cost Mexico 55% of its national territory. In exchange, the U.S. paid $15 million, roughly $550 million today. Less per square mile than it paid France for Louisiana. The geographic bargain of the century, for one side. Fact 19. The Gadsden Purchase of 1853 bought the southern sections of Arizona and New Mexico, 29,670 square miles, for $10 million. The U.S. needed a southern rail route to California. Mexico, still recovering from losing the war, had little leverage to refuse. The border moved. Legally, without another war. Fact 20. When the border was drawn in 1848, between 75,000 and 100,000 people woke up as U.S. citizens without ever moving a single mile. They didn't cross a border. The border crossed them. Fact 21. El Chamizal, a 600-acre plot between El Paso and Ciudad Juárez that bounced between American and Mexican sovereignty for 100 years. Because the Rio Grande flooded in 1864 and moved the land overnight. The diplomatic standoff ran from 1864 to 1963. It took JFK and the Mexican president to finally settle what a flood started. Fact 22. The Tohono O'odham Nation has lived in the Sonoran Desert for thousands of years, long before the border existed. Today, their tribal lands straddle the boundary. Members require federal identification to cross their own homeland. Fact 23. San Ysidro, the port of entry between San Diego and Tijuana, is the busiest land border crossing in the Western Hemisphere. Over 100,000 people cross it every single day. More than 300,000 on holiday weekends. When most people picture the border, they picture empty desert. Fact 24. El Paso, Texas and Ciudad Juárez, Mexico form the largest binational metropolitan area in the world. A combined population of over 2.7 million people. 2 cities, 2 countries, 2 languages, 1 economy. Fact 25. El Paso is consistently ranked among the safest large cities in the United States. Ciudad Juárez, directly across the bridge, has at times been ranked among the most violent cities in the world. Same geography, same climate, same river, completely different realities. Fact 26. Nogales, Arizona and Nogales, Sonora share the same sewage treatment plant. The infrastructure runs under the international boundary. If you flush in Nogales, Arizona, your wastewater is processed in Mexico. The border separates nations. The pipes don't care. Fact 27. The Amistad Reservoir, the massive dam between Del Rio, Texas and Ciudad Acuña, Mexico, is jointly owned. 50% United States, 50% Mexico. 2 nations own exactly half a lake each, and they've co-managed it since 1969 without a single major incident. Fact 28. Tijuana is a manufacturing hub, a cultural capital, and a medical tourism destination drawing over 1.5 million Americans per year seeking cheaper healthcare and dental care. The city American politics tends to dismiss is bankrolling northern Mexico's economy. Fact 29. Friendship Park, where the fence meets the Pacific Ocean, was designed as a place where families separated by immigration could meet through the barrier. In the 1970s, you could reach through and hold hands. Today, it's triple-layered steel bollards with 20-foot concrete panels. It's still officially called Friendship Park. If this is reshaping how you see this place, that's exactly what the bigger map is for. Subscribe so you don't miss what comes next, because we're about to get into the money. Economics plus the underground. Fact 30. Mexico surpassed China in 2023 to become the United States' single largest trading partner. Every car part, avocado, and semiconductor that moves between them crosses this border. When politicians talk about closing the border, they are describing an economic catastrophe, not a security solution. Fact 31. Over $800 billion in goods crossed the U.S.-Mexico border in 2023. That's approximately $2.2 billion per day, 7 days a week. The border is not primarily a security line. It is primarily a supply chain. Fact 32. Roughly 80% of the avocados Americans consume come from Mexico. So do most of the tomatoes, strawberries, and bell peppers in American grocery stores. When you eat guacamole at a Super Bowl party, you are participating in U.S.-Mexico border economics. Fact 33. The maquiladora system created over 5,000 foreign-owned factories on the Mexican side of the border specifically to manufacture goods for U.S. consumption. They employ over 2 million Mexicans and produce everything from car engines to surgical instruments. The border isn't just where trade passes through, it's where American products are built. Fact 34. There are 48 official ports of entry along the U.S.-Mexico border. Only 26 are certified for commercial vehicle traffic. A single disruption at any major crossing ripples through the entire North American supply chain within 48 hours. Fact 35. Since 1990, U.S. authorities have discovered over 200 cross-border smuggling tunnels. The longest stretched over 4,300 feet between San Diego and Tijuana. Reinforced concrete, underground rail systems, ventilation, electricity. The border goes underground. It has for decades. Fact 36. 92% of all fentanyl seized at the U.S.-Mexico border is intercepted at legal ports of entry, not in the open desert. The fentanyl crisis is not a border barrier problem. It is a customs inspection capacity problem. The wall is guarding the wrong part of the border. Fact 37. The U.S. government spends approximately $20 million per mile to build border wall. A full barrier would cost an estimated $70 billion. drug cartels routinely launch packages over existing walls using commercially available pneumatic cannons. The countermeasures cost $200 at a hardware store. Fact 38. The wait time to cross San Ysidro during peak hours regularly hits 3 to 4 hours. An estimated 500,000 people cross it every week: commuters, workers, students, families, who factor the wait into their daily schedule the way Los Angeles residents factor in the 405. Fact 39. The Tohono O'odham Nation operates a tribal police force patrolling over 75 miles of the U.S.-Mexico border, more border mileage than some entire sectors of the Border Patrol. They've been managing this boundary longer than the agencies built to manage it. Fact 40. In 2010, the U.S. lined the All-American Canal, an 80-mile irrigation channel running along the California border, with concrete. For decades prior, roughly 67,000 acre-feet of water per year had seeped into Mexico, feeding farms in the Mexicali Valley. The moment the lining was complete, that water stopped. Those farms collapsed. Fact 41. The city of Ambos Nogales was a single unified city until 1853, when the Gadsden Purchase drew a border through the middle of it. Families that had lived together for generations woke up in different countries without moving a single mile. Fact 42. The border generates an estimated $1.7 billion in economic activity daily. The underground economy, smuggling, informal labor, gray market goods, adds somewhere between $50 and $100 billion annually on top of that, larger than the GDP of most countries. 8 facts left. These belong on a different kind of map, not the political map, not the news map. The one underneath, showing you what this border is actually doing to the planet and the people who live along it. The hidden map. Fact 43. In 2020, the U.S. government invoked a Cold War-era authority to waive 28 federal laws, including the Endangered Species Act and the Clean Air Act, to fast-track wall construction. Documented jaguar habitat was bulldozed. Archaeological sites were destroyed. National park land was excavated. Environmental review would have taken years. The waiver took weeks. Fact 44. There is a documented history of U.S. citizens being removed across the border by immigration enforcement. People with U.S. birth certificates and passports, due to administrative error. The border does not make flawless distinctions. Sometimes those distinctions are catastrophically wrong. Fact 45. Climate models project that by 2050, significant sections of the border region will face extreme water stress on both sides. The Rio Grande will carry less water. The desert will expand. The geography that already kills people crossing it is going to get more hostile. Fact 46. The U.S. and Mexico don't just share 1,954 miles of surface boundary. They share aquifers, underground water systems with no nationality that don't recognize the line above them. The Hueco-Bolson Aquifer supplies water to El Paso and Juárez simultaneously. When one side pumps it dry, the other loses water too. There is no wall for what's underground. Fact 47. The border between the U.S. and Mexico produces its own culture: norteño music, Tex-Mex cuisine, Spanglish as a first language, architecture that pulls from both traditions. The borderlands don't belong entirely to either country. They are something the map doesn't have a name for yet. Fact 48. The U.S.-Mexico border is the only place on Earth where a first-world economy and a developing economy share a land boundary of this length. That gap in GDP is the engine behind almost everything that happens along this line. The trade, the migration, the tunnels, the maquiladoras. The border doesn't create inequality, it concentrates it into 1,954 miles. Fact 49. Climate scientists project that desertification and water scarcity will displace millions of people from Central America and northern Mexico in the coming decades. The border that exists today, physically, legally, politically, is being asked to absorb a pressure it was not designed to handle. And no one is building a map for what comes next. Fact 50. The United States and Mexico share 1,954 miles of land border, They share 3,100 miles of maritime boundary. They share 300 miles of border underground, in aquifers that recognize no line above them. The full U.S.-Mexico boundary isn't 1,954 miles. The boundary is everywhere. It's just that most of it is invisible. The bigger map close. Here's the bigger map. The U.S.-Mexico border is not a line. It's a system. A river that's drying up. A supply chain worth $2 billion a day. A water treaty both sides are in debt on. A cultural hybrid that belongs to neither country. The conversation on television about this border reduces 1,954 miles of geography to a handful of images. The wall, the river, the crossing. It turns a geographic system into a moral debate. But geography doesn't do moral debates. It does rivers, aquifers, trade routes, climate patterns, migration corridors, and ancient tribal lands that predate both nations by 10,000 years. The border you were given on a map was always a simplification. The territory is infinitely more complicated, infinitely more human. And now, you know 50 reasons why. If this gave you a bigger picture, subscribe. Because there are borders all over this world that look simple on a map and look nothing like that from the ground. This is the bigger map.